The morning sun cast long shadows across the rolling countryside of Wiltshire as Queen Camilla's convoy made its way through the narrow lanes toward Bromham. Inside the royal car, she gazed out at the familiar landscape that had become so dear to her heart over the years. This was not just another official visit on her calendar. Today held special meaning, as she was returning to a community center that had quietly become one of her favorite places to connect with ordinary people living extraordinary lives. Bromham Local Center sat nestled in the heart of the village like a warm embrace. The modest building had served the community for decades, hosting everything from children's birthday parties to support groups for elderly residents. Its weathered brick walls had witnessed countless stories of human connection, resilience, and hope. For Queen Camilla, this place represented something precious that royal palaces could never offer: authentic human warmth without ceremony or pretense. As her car pulled up to the center, a small crowd had gathered despite the early hour. These are not tourists with cameras or reporters seeking quotes. They were neighbors, volunteers, and regular visitors who had come simply because they knew their queen genuinely cared about their little corner of the world. Children pressed their faces against the windows of the center, their breath fogging the glass as they watched for her arrival. Margaret Thompson, the center's director, stood at the entrance with barely contained excitement. She had worked at Bromham Local Center for 15 years, dedicating her life to creating programs that brought people together. Margaret understood that behind all the royal protocol, Queen Camilla was someone who truly listened when people shared their struggles and victories. That quality had made previous visits feel less like formal events and more like conversations between friends. Queen Camilla emerged from her car with a grace that came naturally after decades of public service. But her smile was immediate and genuine. She paused to speak with the children first, crouching down to their eye level despite the formal dress she wore. Their giggles filled the morning air as she asked about their pets, their school projects, and their dreams. One little boy proudly announced that his goldfish could do tricks, which prompted Queen Camilla to inquire seriously about the specific nature of these aquatic talents. "Your Majesty, welcome back to our little home away from home," Margaret said as she guided the Queen toward the entrance. The phrase was not empty politeness. Over her previous visits, Queen Camilla had indeed made this place feel like an extension of her own world, where she could set aside the weight of royal duty and simply be present with people who needed to know someone cared. Inside, the center buzzed with carefully contained energy. The regular morning activities continued as planned. Elderly residents played cards in one corner, while a mother's group shared coffee and conversation near the kitchen. A small art class had set up easels by the large windows, taking advantage of the natural light that streamed across their canvases. This was exactly what Queen Camilla loved most about these visits: life continuing naturally around her presence, rather than stopping for formal presentations. Tom Richardson, a retired carpenter in his 70s, looked up from his morning crossword puzzle as the Queen entered. He had been coming to the center for 3 years since his wife passed away, finding comfort in the routine and companionship it provided. Tom remembered Queen Camilla from her last visit 6 months ago, when she had sat with him and several other widowers, listening to their stories about love, loss, and learning to build new kinds of happiness in unexpected places. "Morning, Your Majesty," Tom called out in his straightforward manner. "Still working on that garden you told me about?" Queen Camilla's face lit up at being remembered. "Oh, Tom, yes. The roses you recommended are absolutely thriving. I should have listened to your advice about pruning much sooner." Their conversation continued naturally, two people sharing the common language of gardening, while others in the room smiled at the easy familiarity between them. In the art corner, Sarah Williams was putting finishing touches on a charcoal drawing. Sarah had started attending the center's art classes after a difficult divorce left her searching for new ways to express herself and connect with others. She was naturally shy and had never considered herself artistic, but something about working with her hands helped quiet the anxious thoughts that often overwhelmed her mind. "Sarah's been working on something special," Margaret whispered to Queen Camilla as they moved through the room. "She won't tell anyone what it is, but she's been here every morning for 2 weeks, completely absorbed in her project. Queen Camilla approached Sarah's easel with genuine curiosity rather than obligation. Royal training had taught her to show interest in people's work, but her fascination with creativity was entirely authentic. She had always believed that art revealed something essential about the human spirit, the drive to create beauty and meaning even in difficult circumstances. "May I see what you've been working on?" Queen Camilla asked gently, recognizing the vulnerability that came with sharing creative work. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she turned the easel. The charcoal drawing revealed a detailed portrait of a small terrier mix, captured mid-play with tongue lolling and ears perked forward in obvious joy. Every line showed careful observation and genuine affection. The dog's expression seemed almost alive on the paper, radiating the kind of uncomplicated happiness that only beloved pets could embody. "It's beautiful," Queen Camilla said, and her admiration was completely sincere. "The detail in the eyes is remarkable. You've captured something wonderful about this little one's personality." Sarah's cheeks flushed with pleased embarrassment. "Thank you, Your Majesty. I actually drew this from memory. It's my neighbor's dog, Moley. He brings such joy to everyone in our street. Even when I'm having my worst days, seeing him bounce around the garden makes everything feel a bit brighter." The name stopped Queen Camilla completely. For a moment, the busy room around them seemed to fade as she stared at the drawing with new recognition. Moley was not just any dog. Moley was her own beloved companion, the Jack Russell Terrier who had become an inseparable part of her daily life. "Did you say Moley?" Queen Camilla asked, her voice carrying a note of wonder that made Sarah look up with concern. "Yes, that's right. He belongs to Mrs. Patterson next door to me. Such a character, that one. Always getting into mischief, but somehow managing to charm his way out of trouble." Sarah paused, studying Queen Camilla's expression with growing curiosity. Do you know Moley?" Queen Camilla found herself laughing with pure delight. "My dear Sarah, Moley is my dog. You've drawn a portrait of my own little troublemaker without even knowing it." The revelation sent ripples of excitement through the room as others gathered to hear the extraordinary coincidence. Sarah stared at her drawing with new amazement, realizing she had unknowingly created a portrait of the Queen's own beloved pet. The mathematical impossibility of such a coincidence seemed to hover in the air between them. "But how is that possible?" Sarah asked, her practical mind struggling with the implications. "I mean, Mrs. Patterson has had Moley for years. She got him from a local rescue when he was just a puppy." Margaret stepped forward with the expression of someone solving a puzzle. "Mrs. Patterson moved here from London about 4 years ago, didn't she, Sarah? She mentioned something about needing to downsize after her husband's passing." Queen Camilla nodded slowly, pieces falling into place. "We had several litters from Moley's mother over the years. Some of the puppies went to rescue organizations when we couldn't place them directly with families we knew. It's entirely possible that your neighbor's Moley is related to mine, or perhaps even—" She paused, studying the drawing more carefully. The distinctive markings Sarah had captured, the white patch over the left eye, the black spots along the right side, the particular way the ears folded, were remarkably similar to her own Moley's features. Queen Camilla found herself wondering if this might be more than coincidence, more than just similar breeding. Would it be terribly forward of me to ask if I might meet Mrs. Patterson's Moley? Queen Camilla asked. "I have to admit, I'm rather curious now." Sarah's eyes widened at the request. "I'm sure she would be absolutely thrilled. Mrs. Patterson loves talking about Moley almost as much as she loves the little fellow himself. She's probably at home right now. She rarely goes out in the mornings because that's when Moley likes to patrol the garden, and she worries he'll dig up her flower beds if she's not there to supervise." The spontaneity of the request delighted everyone in the room. This was exactly the kind of unscripted moment that made Queen Camilla's visits so special. The willingness to follow interesting threads wherever they might lead, to treat unexpected discoveries as opportunities for connection rather than disruptions, to carefully plan schedules. Margaret quickly made arrangements, checking with security and ensuring that an impromptu visit to Mrs. Patterson's home could be accommodated safely. The excitement in the room was infectious as word spread that they were all about to witness a reunion between Queen Camilla and a dog who might be her own pet's relative, discovered through the artistic talents of a shy woman who had no idea she was drawing royalty's beloved companion. As they prepared to make the short walk to Mrs. Patterson's cottage, Queen Camilla found herself holding Sarah's drawing carefully in her hands. The skill evident in every line spoke to hours of patient observation and genuine affection for her subject. This was not just a drawing. It was a love letter to a little dog who brought joy to his neighborhood simply by being himself. "Sarah," Queen Camilla said quietly as they prepared to leave the center, "regardless of what we discover about the connection between our Moleys, I want you to know that this drawing is absolutely beautiful. You have a real gift for capturing not just how something looks, but how it feels to love it." The words meant more to Sarah than any formal recognition could have. Coming from someone who had access to the finest art collections in the world, the praise felt like validation of something she had barely dared to believe about herself. She had started taking art classes simply to fill empty hours after her divorce, never imagining she might actually have talent worth recognizing. As the small group prepared to venture out into the village, the morning that had started as a routine royal visit had transformed into something entirely different. They were embarking on a mystery that connected a queen's beloved pet, a lonely widow's artistic discovery, and the possibility that love and coincidence might be more intertwined than anyone had imagined. The walk through Bromham's quiet streets took on the quality of a gentle adventure. Queen Camilla found herself seeing the village through new eyes, imagining a small terrier bringing the same mischievous energy to these garden paths that her own Moley brought to the grounds of her royal residences. The thought of two dogs, possibly related, living such different lives, yet sharing the same capacity for bringing unexpected joy to their humans, filled her with a warm anticipation for whatever they might discover at Mrs. Patterson's cottage door. Mrs. Eleanor Patterson was in her kitchen, humming softly while preparing her morning tea, when she heard an unusual commotion coming from her front garden. Through the lace curtains, she glimpsed what appeared to be several well-dressed people walking up her garden path, led by Margaret from the local center. Eleanor's first thought was that something must be terribly wrong, perhaps a neighborhood emergency that required door-to-door visits. Moley, her beloved Jack Russell Terrier, had been lounging in his favorite sunny spot by the back door, but immediately perked up at the sound of approaching voices. His keen hearing had detected something interesting long before Eleanor noticed the visitors. The little dog's tail began its characteristic helicopter motion as he trotted toward the front of the house, eager to investigate these potential new friends. Eleanor smoothed her apron and checked her reflection quickly in the hallway mirror before opening the door. At 72, she maintained the kind of dignified appearance that came from decades of taking pride in her home and herself, even though she rarely had visitors these days. Her late husband had always said that one never knew when important company might arrive, so it was best to always be prepared to welcome guests properly. "Good morning, Mrs. Patterson," Margaret called out cheerfully. "I hope you don't mind the unexpected visit, but we have someone very special who would love to meet Moley." Eleanor opened the door wider, her curious gaze taking in the small group gathered on her doorstep. There was Sarah from down the street, holding what appeared to be an art portfolio, and several other people she didn't immediately recognize. But it was the elegantly dressed woman at the center of the group who made Eleanor's hand fly to her chest in sudden recognition. "Oh my goodness," Eleanor whispered, her voice barely audible. "Your Majesty, I had no idea. Please come in." Queen Camilla stepped forward with a warm smile that immediately put Eleanor at ease. "Mrs. Patterson, I hope you'll forgive the intrusion. We've just made the most remarkable discovery at the local center, and I was hoping I might meet your famous Moley." As if summoned by his name, Moley appeared at Eleanor's feet, his brown and white face tilted upward to assess these interesting visitors. The little dog showed no awareness that royalty stood at his threshold. To him, these were simply new humans who might be convinced to provide treats or belly rubs if approached with sufficient charm. Queen Camilla looked down at Moley and felt her breath catch in her throat. The resemblance to her own beloved pet was remarkable, far beyond what she had expected even after seeing Sarah's detailed drawing. The white patch over the left eye was nearly identical, as were the distinctive black markings along his right side. But it was Moley's expression that truly startled her, the intelligent, slightly mischievous look that seemed to say he was always planning some new adventure. "He's absolutely beautiful," Queen Camilla said, crouching down to Moley's level. The little dog approached without hesitation, his tail wagging as he sniffed her extended hand with the thorough investigation that terriers were famous for conducting on new acquaintances. Eleanor watched in amazement as Moley, who was usually somewhat reserved with strangers, immediately began showing off for the queen. He performed his favorite trick of sitting up on his hind legs with his front paws folded, then followed it with a playful bow that never failed to charm visitors. Within moments, he was rolling on his back to display his spotted belly, clearly hoping for the attention he had learned was usually forthcoming when he demonstrated his full range of adorable behaviors. "I've never seen him warm up to anyone so quickly," Eleanor marveled. "Usually, it takes him at least a few visits before he decides whether he likes someone enough to share his tricks." Sarah stepped forward with her portfolio, her excitement barely contained. "Mrs. Patterson, you're never going to believe this, but I drew a portrait of Moley for my art class, and it turns out that Her Majesty has a dog named Moley too. They think the dogs might be related." Eleanor's eyes widened as Sarah carefully revealed the charcoal drawing. "Oh my word, Sarah, that's absolutely perfect. You've captured him exactly as he is." She paused, processing the rest of what Sarah had said. "Did you say Your Majesty has a Moley as well?" Queen Camilla laughed at the confusion that was clearly evident on Eleanor's face. "I know it sounds impossible, but yes, my Moley is at home right now, probably digging holes in the garden that my groundskeepers will discover later today." When I saw Sarah's beautiful drawing, I recognized so many of the same characteristics. Eleanor invited them all into her sitting room, where the morning light streamed through windows that overlooked a small but meticulously maintained garden. Moley immediately claimed his favorite armchair, though he kept one eye on the visitors in case any treats might materialize from their pockets. The room was filled with photographs of Eleanor's late husband and various family members, but Eleanor noticed that Queen Camilla's attention was drawn to the numerous pictures of Moley scattered throughout the space. "He's quite the photographer's model," Eleanor said with obvious pride. "I'm afraid I've become one of those people who takes more pictures of her dog than most people take of their grandchildren." Queen Camilla examined the photographs with genuine interest, noting the way Moley's personality shone through in every image. There he was as a tiny puppy, drowning in a bed that was far too large for him. Another photo showed him proudly sitting next to a vegetable garden, his muzzle covered in soil for what had clearly been an unauthorized digging expedition. A more recent picture captured him mid-leap as he chased a butterfly, his entire body expressing pure joy in the moment. "These are wonderful," Queen Camilla said. "They really show his character. My Moley has that same expression when he's planning mischief." Eleanor settled into her chair with the comfortable ease of someone preparing to share a beloved story. "I got Moley from the Wiltshire Animal Rescue about 4 years ago. I had just lost my husband, and the house felt so terribly quiet. My daughter suggested I might consider getting a small dog for company, though I wasn't sure I was ready for that kind of responsibility at my age." She paused to stroke Moley's ears as he settled beside her chair. "But the moment I saw this little fellow at the rescue center, I knew he was meant to come home with me. The volunteers said he had been brought in as a stray, though he was clearly well cared for and had obviously been someone's beloved pet. They thought he might have gotten lost, or perhaps his previous owner had to give him up due to circumstances beyond their control." Queen Camilla leaned forward with interest. "Did they have any information about where he came from originally?" "Not much," Eleanor admitted. "The person who found him said he was discovered wandering near a large estate outside London. He was wearing a collar, but no identification tags. The rescue center tried to find his original family for several weeks, but no one came forward to claim him." The pieces of the puzzle began forming a clearer picture in Queen Camilla's mind. Several years ago, there had been concerns about one of her own Moley's siblings, a puppy who had somehow gotten separated from his new family during a house move. Despite extensive searches, they had never been able to locate the little dog, and she had often wondered what had become of him. "Mrs. Patterson," Queen Camilla said carefully, "would you mind terribly if I shared some photos of my Moley with you? I have some pictures on my phone that might be interesting to compare." Eleanor nodded eagerly as Queen Camilla retrieved her phone and scrolled through countless photos of her own terrier. Like Eleanor, Queen Camilla had become rather devoted to documenting her pet's daily adventures, much to the amusement of her staff who were accustomed to being asked to pause important conversations so she could capture Moley in a particularly endearing pose. The first photo Queen Camilla showed was of her Moley sleeping in a patch of sunlight, curled into the same tight ball that Eleanor's Moley favored for his afternoon naps. The resemblance was striking, but it was the next photo that made Eleanor gasp audibly. Queen Camilla's Moley was sitting in the same distinctive pose that Eleanor's dog had just demonstrated, upright on his hind legs with front paws folded, head tilted slightly to the right. "That's impossible," Eleanor breathed. "Moley's sitting position is so unusual. I've never seen another dog sit quite that way." Sarah, who had been quietly observing the growing excitement in the room, spoke up with a logical question that everyone was thinking. "Do you think they could actually be the same dog? I mean, could Mrs. Patterson's Moley actually be Your Majesty's missing puppy?" Margaret, ever practical, suggested they look for any distinguishing marks that might help confirm or rule out the possibility. "Moley," she called to the little dog, "come here and let's have a proper look at you." Moley, delighted to be the center of attention, trotted over and obligingly allowed himself to be gently examined. Eleanor pointed out a small scar on his left hind leg that the veterinarian had said was likely from a minor injury when he was very young. Queen Camilla's heart began racing as she remembered a similar mark on one of her own Moley siblings, the result of a tiny scrape during a particularly enthusiastic play session with his littermates. "There's something else," Queen Camilla said, scrolling through more photos on her phone. "My Moley has a very distinctive birthmark under his right ear, a small dark spot shaped rather like a heart." She paused, studying Eleanor's Moley with growing excitement. "Would you mind if we checked?" Eleanor gently lifted Moley's ear, and there, clearly visible against his white fur, was a small heart-shaped birthmark exactly where Queen Camilla had described. The room fell silent as the implications of this discovery sank in. "I think," Queen Camilla said quietly, her voice filled with wonder, "we may have just solved a mystery that's been troubling me for years." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears as she realized what this meant. The beloved companion who had brought such joy to her lonely days, who had given her a reason to get up each morning and venture into the garden, who had become the center of her daily routine. This precious little dog might actually belong to someone else. Worse, he might belong to the Queen of England. Sensing her distress, Queen Camilla reached over and took Eleanor's hand gently. "Mrs. Patterson, please don't worry. Whatever the truth might be about Moley's origins, it's clear that he has found exactly where he belongs. The love between you two is obvious, and that's what matters most." The reassurance in Queen Camilla's voice helped calm Eleanor's fears, but she couldn't quite shake the worry that this wonderful coincidence might mean losing the companion who had become her dearest friend. Moley, oblivious to the human drama surrounding his identity, had found a comfortable spot where he could keep an eye on everyone while positioning himself optimally for any treats that might be offered. "What I'm wondering," Queen Camilla continued thoughtfully, "is whether this might be an opportunity for something rather wonderful. What if, instead of this being about loss or separation, it could be about expanding our families?" The suggestion hung in the air as everyone considered the possibilities. Sarah found herself holding her breath, hoping that this remarkable day might lead to friendship rather than heartbreak. Margaret smiled at the diplomatic grace with which Queen Camilla was handling what could have been a very difficult situation. Eleanor looked down at Moley, who gazed back at her with the trusting expression that had won her heart 4 years ago. Whatever happened next, She knew that this little dog had already given her far more than she could have ever imagined when she first decided to visit the Animal Rescue Center on that lonely afternoon. The afternoon sun had shifted across Eleanor's sitting room by the time they finished comparing photographs and sharing stories about their respective Moleys. What had started as a chance meeting had evolved into something that felt like a reunion between old friends, though they had only just met. Queen Camilla found herself completely absorbed in Eleanor's tales of Moley's daily adventures, while Eleanor listened with growing amazement to stories of her dog's possible royal sibling. "Would you like to see the garden?" Eleanor asked, noticing that Moley had begun his customary afternoon routine of staring meaningfully at the back door. "He usually takes me on his patrol route about this time each day. I think he believes the squirrels are plotting something that requires constant surveillance." They moved through Eleanor's compact but beautifully maintained garden, where every plant seemed to have been chosen with careful consideration for both beauty and practicality. Moley immediately assumed his role as tour guide, trotting importantly from one favorite spot to another while providing what sounded like detailed commentary in the form of occasional barks and excited sniffing. "He's showing off for you," Eleanor said fondly as Moley demonstrated his ability to catch a tennis ball in midair. "He doesn't usually perform quite so many tricks in succession. I think he knows he has a very important audience today." Queen Camilla watched with delight as the little dog bounded through his routine with obvious pride. "My Moley does exactly the same thing when we have visitors. There's something about terriers that makes them natural entertainers, isn't there? They seem to understand instinctively that life should include a healthy dose of performance and mischief." Sarah had been quietly sketching throughout the afternoon, capturing moments of connection between Queen Camilla and both Moley and Eleanor. Her artistic eye was drawn to the natural ease with which the Queen interacted with both her subjects, crouching down to Moley's level without concern for her formal attire, listening to Eleanor's stories with the same attention she would give to any important state matter. "Your Majesty," Sarah said hesitantly, "I hope this isn't presumptuous, but would you like me to create a companion piece to the original drawing? Perhaps something that captures today's meeting?" The offer touched Queen Camilla more deeply than she had expected. "Sarah, that would be absolutely wonderful. This has been such an extraordinary day. Having a visual record of it would mean a great deal to me." Margaret, who had been thinking practically about the implications of the day's discoveries, cleared her throat gently. "Your Majesty, I was wondering if you might consider making this connection more permanent. Eleanor visits the center regularly, and we would be honored if you would consider making Bromham a regular stop when you're in the area. Perhaps Eleanor and Moley could become something of a bridge between the center and your own interests in animal welfare." The suggestion sparked an immediate enthusiasm in Queen Camilla's eyes. She had long been passionate about supporting local animal rescue organizations and had often wished for more opportunities to stay connected with individual success stories. The idea of maintaining a relationship with Eleanor and her Moley, while simultaneously supporting the community center that had made their meeting possible, appealed to her sense of meaningful engagement. "Mrs. Patterson," Queen Camilla said, turning to Eleanor with a warm smile, "how would you feel about becoming something of an unofficial ambassador for rescue animals in our area? I would very much like to stay in touch and hear about Moley's continued adventures." Eleanor's face flushed with pleased surprise. The thought that her quiet life with Moley might somehow contribute to helping other animals in need gave her a sense of purpose she hadn't felt since her husband's passing. "I would be absolutely honored, Your Majesty. Moley, and I would love to help however we can." As the afternoon progressed, their conversation naturally turned to the broader challenges facing animal rescue organizations. Eleanor shared her observations about the number of older pets who struggled to find homes, while Queen Camilla discussed her concerns about breeding practices that prioritize profit over animal welfare. Sarah contributed insights from her volunteer work at the local veterinary clinic, where she had seen firsthand the impact of both responsible and irresponsible pet ownership. "You know," Queen Camilla mused, watching Moley investigate a particularly interesting patch of soil near Eleanor's rose bushes, I think there's something to be said for the way rescue animals choose their families rather than the other way around. Moley clearly knew exactly what Eleanor needed, just as Eleanor somehow knew that he was the right companion for her. Eleanor nodded thoughtfully. The volunteers at the rescue center told me that some dogs seem to wait for exactly the right person, even turning down families that would have provided perfectly good homes. They said Moley had been there for several weeks, politely but firmly rejecting potential adopters until I arrived. The idea that Moley might have been waiting specifically for Eleanor added another layer of meaning to their connection. It suggested that love and companionship could transcend simple circumstance, that sometimes the universe conspired to bring together beings who needed each other in ways that weren't immediately obvious. Margaret had been documenting the afternoon's conversations in her mind, already planning how to share this remarkable story with the broader community. Your Majesty, I wonder if you would consider allowing us to share today's story with our newsletter readers? Obviously with Eleanor's permission, and focusing on the importance of animal rescue rather than any personal details. Queen Camilla looked to Eleanor for her response. What do you think, Mrs. Patterson? Would you be comfortable with people knowing about today's discovery? Eleanor considered the question carefully. She was naturally a private person who had lived quietly since her husband's death, rarely drawing attention to herself or her circumstances. But the thought that sharing Moley's story might encourage others to consider rescue animals, or might provide hope to other lonely people who wondered whether companionship was still possible in later life, made the prospect of publicity seem worthwhile. If it might help other animals find homes like Moley found his home with me, then, yes, I think that would be lovely, Eleanor decided. Sarah looked up from her sketching with an idea forming. What if we created a small exhibition at the center? We could display the drawings alongside photographs and stories about local rescue successes. It might inspire more people to consider adoption, and it would give artists in the community a chance to contribute something meaningful. The concept immediately captured everyone's imagination. Queen Camilla could envision a rotating gallery that celebrated the bonds between rescued animals and their human families, while also showcasing local artistic talent. Eleanor pictured other pet owners sharing their own stories of unexpected companionship, creating a community narrative around love found in unlikely places. I could contribute several pieces, Sarah continued, her shyness disappearing in the face of creative possibility. And I know other artists in the area who would be thrilled to participate. We could even include children's artwork. I think young people often see the personality in animals more clearly than adults do. Margaret was already mentally organizing the logistics. We could coordinate with local rescue organizations to provide information about available animals right alongside the artwork. People would be able to see the joy that adoption brings while also learning about current pets who need homes. As they discussed the possibilities for the exhibition, Moley had completed his garden patrol and returned to the group with a stick he had apparently deemed worthy of presentation to his distinguished visitors. He dropped it ceremoniously at Queen Camilla's feet before sitting in his characteristic upright position, clearly expecting praise for his thoughtful gift. "Thank you very much, Moley," Queen Camilla said solemnly, accepting the stick with the gravity she might have used for receiving a state gift. "This is clearly a very special stick indeed." Eleanor laughed at the formal courtesy with which Queen Camilla treated Moley's offering. "He always brings his favorite treasures to visitors he really likes. You should consider yourself quite honored. He doesn't share his best sticks with just anyone." The afternoon was beginning to fade toward evening when Queen Camilla realized how much time had passed. What was supposed to have been a brief visit to the community center had stretched into hours of conversation, discovery, and planning. She found herself reluctant to leave this peaceful garden where she had found not just a connection to her own beloved pet's possible past, but a glimpse into the kind of quiet contentment that could flourish when love was allowed to grow naturally. "I'm afraid I must return to my other obligations," Queen Camilla said regretfully. "But, Mrs. Patterson, would you and Moley consider visiting me sometime? I think our two Moleys should have a proper meeting, and I would very much like to show you both our gardens." Eleanor's eyes widened at the invitation. Your Majesty, we would be absolutely delighted. Though I must warn you that Moley has very definite opinions about gardens, and he's not always respectful of formal landscaping. Queen Camilla's laughter rang across the garden. My dear Eleanor, I think you'll find that our gardens have survived visits from many dignified guests who turned out to have surprisingly informal approaches to horticulture. Besides, I suspect my Moley could learn a few new tricks from yours about the proper way to investigate interesting smells. As they prepared to say goodbye, Sarah carefully wrapped her drawings in a protective folder to present to Queen Camilla. The original portrait of Moley had been joined by several sketches from the afternoon's interactions, capturing moments of connection that would have otherwise existed only in memory. Sarah, Queen Camilla said as she accepted the artwork, these are truly beautiful. You have a remarkable gift for capturing not just appearances, but emotions. I hope you'll continue developing your talent. The world needs more artists who can help us see the love that exists in everyday moments. The praise meant everything to Sarah, who had spent most of her adult life believing she had no particular creative abilities. This afternoon had revealed not just artistic skill she didn't know she possessed, but also the confidence to share that skill with others in meaningful ways. As Queen Camilla's car prepared to leave, Moley took up a position by Eleanor's gate where he could properly supervise the departure of his new friends. His tail maintained a steady wag as he watched the proceedings, clearly pleased with how the afternoon had unfolded, but not overly concerned about the farewell. In his experience, people who brought such positive energy usually found their way back for return visits. Eleanor stood beside Moley, one hand resting gently on his head as they waved goodbye. The day had brought her more joy and excitement than she had experienced in years, but more importantly, it had connected her to a broader community of people who understood the transformative power of animal companionship. She was no longer just a lonely widow with a beloved pet. She was part of a network of animal lovers who were committed to making a difference in their corner of the world. 3 weeks after the remarkable discovery at Bromham Local Center, Queen Camilla's private secretary was making unusual arrangements that had nothing to do with state functions or official ceremonies. Instead, phone calls were being made to coordinate a very special reunion between two terriers who might share more than just a name, and their devoted human companions who had found unexpected friendship through the most extraordinary circumstances. Eleanor Patterson had spent the intervening weeks in a state of excited preparation that reminded her of getting ready for Christmas when she was a child. The invitation to visit Queen Camilla's private residence with Moley felt like stepping into a fairy tale, except that this particular story was entirely real and centered around her beloved four-legged companion, who remained blissfully unaware of his potentially royal connections. Now Moley, Eleanor said as she brushed his coat to a glossy shine on the morning of their visit, you must remember to be on your best behavior today. We're going to meet your possible brother, and I want you to make a good impression. Moley submitted to the grooming with patient dignity, though his bright eyes suggested he understood something special was happening. He had developed an uncanny ability to sense when Eleanor was particularly excited about something, and her nervous energy that morning was unmistakable. The extra attention to his appearance, combined with the special traveling carrier he only used for very important occasions, indicated that this would be no ordinary day. Sarah Williams had also been invited to join the visit, bringing with her the completed companion drawings she had been working on since their first meeting. The artistic project had evolved beyond what anyone initially imagined, becoming a detailed visual story that captured not just the physical resemblance between the two dogs, but the emotional connections that had formed between their human families. I've never been so nervous about showing my work, Sarah confided to Margaret as they prepared to leave Bromham together. What if the drawings don't live up to Her Majesty's expectations? Margaret smiled reassuringly. Sarah, you've created something beautiful that tells a story none of us could have imagined. The Queen appreciated your first drawing because it came from the heart, and these new pieces show that same authentic spirit. The journey to Queen Camilla's residence took them through countryside that gradually became more manicured and formal though Eleanor noticed that the gardens they passed maintained a natural beauty that suggested careful stewardship rather than rigid control. When they finally approached the gates, Moley pressed his nose to the car window with obvious interest in the expansive grounds that stretched beyond the entrance. Queen Camilla was waiting in her private garden when they arrived, and beside her sat a small terrier whose resemblance to Eleanor's Moley was even more striking in person than it had appeared in photographs. The two dogs spotted each other immediately, and their reaction was unlike anything their owners had ever witnessed. Both Moleys began an excited dance of recognition that seemed to transcend normal canine introduction protocols. They circled each other with what could only be described as joyful amazement, their tails wagging so enthusiastically that their entire bodies wiggled with excitement. Within moments, they were engaged in the kind of synchronized play that suggested an immediate and profound connection. "I've never seen anything like it," Queen Camilla marveled as they watched the two dogs chase each other in perfect harmony around the garden paths. "My Moley is usually rather reserved with new dogs, but it's as if he's greeting an old friend." Eleanor nodded in agreement, equally amazed by her own Moley's behavior. "He's the same way. Usually it takes him ages to warm up to other pets, but look at them. They're acting like littermates who've just been reunited." The two women settled onto a comfortable bench overlooking the garden while their dogs continued their exuberant reunion. Sarah set up her easel nearby, already sketching the remarkable scene unfolding before them. The afternoon light was perfect for capturing the joy radiating from both animals as they discovered toys to share and interesting smells to investigate together. "Sarah," Queen Camilla said, observing the artist's focused concentration, "I hope you realize you're documenting something quite extraordinary. Whether these two are actually related or simply kindred spirits, this meeting will be something we remember for the rest of our lives." As the hours passed, the two Moleys displayed an uncanny synchronization in their behaviors. They discovered identical favorite spots for afternoon naps, chose the same toys from the extensive collection available in the garden, and even developed a coordinated approach to begging for treats that involved sitting side by side in the same distinctive upright position that had first caught Queen Camilla's attention in Sarah's drawing. Eleanor and Queen Camilla found their conversation ranging far beyond dogs to discover shared interests in gardening, literature, and the challenges of maintaining meaningful connections in an increasingly disconnected world. Eleanor's wisdom, earned through decades of marriage and the subsequent journey of learning to find contentment alone, resonated deeply with Queen Camilla's own observations about the importance of authentic relationships. "You know," Queen Camilla said as they watched the two dogs share a water bowl with perfect politeness, "I think they're teaching us something important about family. It doesn't always matter where you came from or what your official connections might be. Sometimes family is simply about recognizing something of yourself in another being." Eleanor smiled at the observation. "Moley has certainly taught me that love can appear unexpectedly at any stage of life. When I adopted him, I thought I was giving a home to a dog who needed one. I didn't realize he was actually rescuing me from loneliness I hadn't even fully acknowledged." The afternoon's most remarkable moment came when both dogs simultaneously performed a complex trick sequence that neither had ever been formally taught, but which they executed with perfect coordination. They sat in unison, then lay down with their heads positioned identically, followed by a synchronized roll that ended with both of them on their backs, paws in the air, gazing expectantly at their audience. "That settles it for me," Queen Camilla laughed. "Whether they're biological brothers or not, these two are definitely connected in ways that go beyond coincidence." Sarah looked up from her easel with excitement. "I think I've captured something very special here. The way they move together, the expressions on their faces, it's like they're having a conversation that only they can understand." As the afternoon progressed toward evening, the visiting party found themselves reluctant to end what had become a perfect day. The two dogs had worn themselves out with play and were now contentedly sharing a large cushion in the garden, curled together as if they had been sleeping side by side their entire lives. Queen Camilla had been thinking about the exhibition idea that Sarah and Margaret had proposed, and the afternoon's events had crystallized her vision for what such a project could accomplish. I wonder if you would all be interested in making this dog reunion the centerpiece of our rescue animal exhibition. We could tell the complete story, from Sarah's original drawing discovery to today's meeting, and use it to illustrate the remarkable connections that can develop through animal adoption. The proposal excited everyone, but Eleanor had a concern. Your Majesty, I'm honored by the suggestion, but I worry about too much public attention. Moley and I are quite content with our quiet life. Queen Camilla understood Eleanor's hesitation completely. We would handle everything very carefully, focusing on the message about rescue animals rather than personal details. And of course, you would have complete control over what aspects of your story you're comfortable sharing. Margaret, ever practical, was already envisioning how such an exhibition could expand their community center's impact. We could create educational materials about responsible pet ownership alongside the artistic displays. People could learn about animal welfare while enjoying beautiful artwork. Sarah added her own vision to the growing plan. I could teach our classes specifically focused on pet portraiture. People could create drawings of their own animals while learning about proper pet care. It would combine creativity with education in a way that might reach people who wouldn't normally attend either type of program separately. As they discussed the possibilities, both Moleys stirred from their shared nap and wandered over to their respective humans. Each carrying a tennis ball, they had somehow managed to coordinate selecting from the toy collection. They dropped the ball simultaneously at their owner's feet before sitting in identical poses, heads tilted at matching angles as if posing for a formal portrait. They're definitely showing off now. Eleanor laughed, reaching down to scratch her Moley behind the ears. I think they know they're the stars of today's show. Queen Camilla stroked her own Moley's head affectionately. I suspect they're also hinting that it's time for evening treats. My Moley has a very reliable internal clock when it comes to dinner schedules. The mention of food prompted both dogs to demonstrate their most persuasive begging techniques, which proved to be remarkably similar combinations of soulful expressions, strategic positioning, and subtle tail movements designed to communicate both patience and desperate hunger. As the visit drew to a close, Queen Camilla made an offer that surprised everyone. Mrs. Patterson, I know this might seem unusual, but I would very much like to make these reunions a regular occurrence. Perhaps once a month, we could arrange for the Moleys to spend time together. I think it would be good for both of them, and, frankly, I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversations. Eleanor's face lit up with genuine pleasure. Your Majesty, I can't think of anything that would make us happier. Moley clearly adores his possible brother, and I must admit that I felt more energized and purposeful today than I have in years. Sarah carefully packed her artwork, including several new sketches that captured the day's most memorable moments. Your Majesty, would it be appropriate for me to create a formal portrait of both Moleys together? Something that could serve as the centerpiece for our exhibition. Queen Camilla's eyes sparkled with enthusiasm. Sarah, that would be absolutely perfect. And I think I know exactly where such a portrait should be displayed first, right here in my own home, where it can remind me daily of this wonderful friendship that began with your artistic talent. As they prepared for departure, both dogs seemed to understand that separation was imminent. They engaged in one final play session that had the quality of a farewell ritual, chasing each other in circles before coming together for what looked remarkably like a canine embrace. Eleanor found herself wiping away tears as she loaded her Moley into his traveling carrier. The little dog looked back toward his new friend with obvious reluctance, but his tail continued wagging as if he understood that this separation was temporary rather than permanent. Queen Camilla walked them to their car, carrying her own Moley, who was equally reluctant to see his visitors leave. This has been one of the most delightful afternoons I've had in years, she said sincerely. Thank you for sharing your wonderful Moley with us, and for reminding me that the most meaningful connections often come from the most unexpected places. As they drove away from the royal residence, Eleanor looked back to see Queen Camilla still standing in her garden, waving goodbye while her Moley watched from her arms. The scene had the quality of a perfect ending to a fairy tale, except that everyone involved knew this was actually a beautiful beginning to friendships that would enrich all their lives for years to come. The drive home was filled with excited conversation about the day's events and plans for future reunions. Moley slept contentedly in his carrier, occasionally making small sounds that suggested he might be dreaming about his remarkable new playmate. Sarah sketched continuously, trying to capture every detail while the memories were still fresh. Already envisioning the masterpiece she would create to commemorate this extraordinary story of connection, coincidence, and the transformative power of love between species. By the time they reached Bromham, the sun was setting over the familiar countryside, painting the sky in shades that seemed to reflect the golden warmth of their perfect afternoon. They had set out that morning with hopes for a pleasant visit, but they were returning with something far more precious: the knowledge that family could be found in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the universe conspired to bring together beings who were meant to share their journeys through life.